As technologists, we're always so far ahead, whether we're road mapping or building out the multi-year plan or thinking about where technology is headed. Children just really live in the moment. Whether it's the smallest things, walking around the neighborhood, relearning what an airplane is or a helicopter or certain kinds of animals. That ability to see joy in things that I've just taken for granted now is almost like a rebirth or relearning that I'm going through.
Welcome to Startup Dad, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of dads who are also leaders in the world of startups and business. I'm your host, Adam Fishman. In today's episode, I'm joined by Colin Anawaty. He's a serial founder and lifelong technologist who has founded multiple companies in the health tech space and was a product leader at Athena Health. He's a single dad and the father of 2 boys. We talked about the importance of prioritizing relationships, including yourself, and why he joined a men's group to better focus on that. Why it's important to take stock of the good and bad from prior generations, how kids are truly more robust and resilient than we think, and the importance of letting kids explore their independence and experience accountability. We ended with a discussion on why no one ever really has it all figured out, professionally or as a dad. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to Startup Dad on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. I hope you enjoy today's conversation with Colin Anawaty. Welcome, Colin Anawaty, to Startup Dad, and a special shout out to Alex Cohen for introducing us, one of our earliest Startup Dad guests. But Colin, it is my absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining me.
Adam, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Excited to do this.
Let's dive in. You are recently divorced. I'm not going to spend much time on that, but you also have a 6-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. And then your oldest son is a 12-year-old bulldog named Benji.
That's right. Company mascot.
How have you been adjusting to life as a single dad?
Candidly and transparently, still figuring that out. It's been an interesting year. Won't belabor kind of what went into the marriage ending, but being a single dad's hard. It's already hard enough just being a new parent, learning all the ins and outs. But I'm kind of recalibrating every week as I'm learning and apologizing frequently to my children, asking for their help.
Yeah, that sounds about like the only thing you can do when they're 6 and 3.5, and you're just making it work. So you are a native Texan, which is fascinating to me. I don't know very many native Texans. That's probably my fault for not getting out into the world more. But what's childhood like growing up in Texas? Like you're in Austin now, but I'm not sure where exactly you grew up and what that life was like.
Yeah, great question. But also, if you want to meet Texans in the summer, go to Colorado. We just flock there, kind of like the Californians are to Austin. But I grew up in Houston, in a neighborhood where you had 2-acre lots that backed up to usually farmland. So there's a bunch of cow patties right behind us. And then in this neighborhood, we also had a bamboo forest. And so I remember the Kevin Costner Robin Hood movie inspiring a lot of forks, bow and arrows, staffs, all carved and made out of bamboo. So it was a pretty great childhood in terms of just getting out into nature and building things.
Awesome. And what were you like as a kid? Were you like you are now, or were you a different kind of kid?
Yeah, great question too. So funny enough, my dad despised the TV, so much so that he put this really rinky-dink TV with bunny ears because we didn't have cable. If you were going to have cable, you had to have a satellite dish the size of a small garage in your backyard. He put that in his office, which made it really uncomfortable to ever want to go down there and watch TV. And so it was really just kind of create your own adventure, whether it was a box of Legos, which were one of my kind of toys that I enjoyed playing with, going out into the bamboo forest. I also got into skateboarding. And so building ramps, things like that. He was, his workshop was very accessible. He liked us learning how to use the power tools. But that was, my childhood until, funny enough, he brought home a computer because he thought the computer was going to be, part of what was going to change meaningfully in business. To his own demise, that became my new toy. And I started learning everything from, early days of DOS and Windows 3.1. I ran a neighborhood bulletin board service at BBS. There's probably some folks listening to your podcast who have no idea what that is.
I certainly know what it is.
Yeah, it was good times. It was the early frontier of, connectivity, and then that led to downloading Duke Nukem and making Duke Nukem maps and sharing those with my neighborhood friends, and then started to learn programming languages, including HTML. And in high school, started working in the summer at a web development company in downtown Houston.
Cool. All kicked off by your dad hiding the TV and bringing home a computer instead.
That's right.
So that's awesome. Well, thanks, Dad, for that. Okay, so you have a life philosophy that I loved, which is prioritize relationships, including the one with yourself. And as part of that, you joined a men's group about 3 years ago. And so I'm very curious, why did you do that? And is that something that you'd recommend for other dads?
Yeah, there's a fellow who's written a book called Five Types of Wealth, Sunil, forget his last name. But there seems to be a trend now, especially in kind of my circle of technology and entrepreneurs who are looking for, call it a greater purpose or some semblance of balance as they kind of go through the motions of building these businesses, kind of pouring their heart and soul into it. And then assuming there's a liquidity event, kind of realizing that money's not the thing that fills your soul. I joined a group thanks to a great guy in Austin who's been here for 20 some odd years, Josh Dilworth, who's kind of really always had an intrigue and an appetite for sense of community and developing community. And they created a program called Vocari, also known as The Calling. And it's a 2-year program broken up into 4 parts: relationship with yourself, relationship with others, relationship with spirituality. So multidimensional. It's not strictly on, Christianity, or we also have atheists. And then relationship with the world through work. So it is to still encourage and really help entrepreneurs align, at least on their next mountain. Maybe your next venture, your next startup has an even greater purpose than, and maybe more clarity around what that purpose is than just making money or building a big business. So I went through that program. Now in the alumni group, they started as just a group of men kind of organizing on their own, and then started to branch out. And we were the first group that was kind of that first branch. And now I think they're up to 8 or 9 different forums of 8 men each.
Wow. And do things around like being a dad or a parenting or maybe going through that process, did that kind of creep in? Does that creep into any of those 4 pillars or any of the kind of alumni interactions that you have now?
For sure. And my group specifically, not all, but a good chunk of them are dads. And so we have lots of shared conversations around parenting and different philosophies. I also kind of take a continuous improvement mindset to my own life. And so while the formal program is 2 years, the alumni is self-organizing. There's not really a start and stop to this. You're going to go through life, hopefully embodying some of these frameworks and tools. That pedestal and those 4 legs can be more stable, hopefully, than before. But I think you're always kind of finding a way to, do the balancing act based on, the seasonality of how you're getting pulled in different directions.
Yeah. And is this this group or another sort of something similar to it, something that you would recommend that dads get involved in their community?
1,000%. And, I'd go so far as to say, whether you're reading Five Types of Wealth or you're in a formal group, one thing I think a lot of men historically have struggled with is just having these conversations amongst friends. Often it's golf or how's work going. A saying that I think really resonates is the longest distance a man will journey in his life is the 18 inches between his head and his heart. And so we have a habit of just cramming those feelings down, and hopefully not in an unhealthy way, but we don't want them to blow up, explode, or create other, real stressors on your life. And so whether it's a formal group, whether reading some books, you can self-organize a group of people in your network and just have more vulnerable conversations. And I think that's a great step forward.
Okay, great. There is a particular, let's call it a parenting style from prior generations that I think many modern parents have really moved away from, right? The pendulum has swung in a very different direction from maybe how we were raised. But you think, and I tend to agree, that it's really important to take stock of the good and the bad from those prior generations. So tell me about what that means for you. How are you doing that work?
Yeah, maybe just kind of restating, in the old way, it was very authoritative, the patriarch kind of model, what dad or the head of household says goes. And then, things kind of went over into this permissive parenting, kind of always reward, encourage your kids, never tell them they're doing something wrong. But I do sense, reading some of the thought leaders in social media or on parenting, that there's kind of a tilt back to somewhere in the middle where you're trying to give the proper amount of guidance, the proper amount of constructive feedback, but hopefully in a way that's not damaging long term. And I think that's kind of the key, to try to find ways in which you can coach your children, just like you might think about coaching an employee in a startup, but doing it in a way that doesn't, hurt their feelings, create insecurities. But I don't necessarily believe you should just have your kids running around and doing whatever they feel is appropriate.
Like feral animals.
Like feral animals, that's right. But that doesn't mean you put a shock collar on them like a dog.
Right. You also talked about kind of like learning at kids level, and that kids are some of the world's best teachers, which I thought was really wasn't a perspective that I ever thought about before, but I think it's true. So how have you come to learn that, your kids are great teachers?
Yeah, good question. Number one, something that I think I've done a little bit more so than, my dad's obviously brought some great things into my life, but it's more apparent to me when I screw up based on their reaction. And so even though they're very young, I'll get down and apologize for where daddy's wrong, or maybe where I need help because they're carrying on at the dinner table and I'm now a single dad. And so I'll ask them to help me out. And that's leveling up their expectations of, being a contributor or being an adult. And I don't want to do that too soon, but I also want to show them it's okay to ask for help, no matter who you are, because I know they look up to me as someone who, I am the dad. Hopefully I have a lot of answers, but it doesn't matter where you are in life, what age you are, what experience you have, you're going to have moments where you need help. And so that's been an area where I'm just taking stock in myself and where I can show up and better for them and better for myself. And then number two is technologists, which I think probably a lot of your listeners are. We're always so far ahead, whether we're road mapping or building out the multi-year plan or thinking about where technology is headed. Children just really live in the moment, whether it's the smallest things, walking around the neighborhood, relearning what an airplane is or a helicopter or certain kinds of animals. That ability to see joy in things that I've just taken for granted now is kind of that almost like a rebirth or relearning that I'm going through.
Yeah, kids have that really interesting way of, they're seeing everything for the first time. And so like they have this curiosity because they've never seen, I don't know, a leaf or a bird that looks that way or a squirrel that's doing this thing. And parents, we kind of just like wander around. We're like, yeah, that's it, So they're really helping you kind of shift perspective and see things through that like kids' point of view, which is great. You have this perspective that, which I share, that kids are robust and resilient. And I often tell people kids are made of rubber, and we just don't really appreciate that. So that's another thing that's been sort of talked about a little bit more as we've maybe, again, we had swung that pendulum in the other direction, thinking that kids are incredibly fragile. And obviously there are certain things that kids can't handle, but that's not true for a lot of stuff. So what does that mean to you? How does that robustness and resilience show up in your life?
Well, the most recent event is the kids now have two homes. And that's been arguably the hardest thing in my life to date, bar none. But I've just been, in terms of learning from my children, just a little bit in awe at their ability to have handled this and not have them breaking down and kind of not understanding it. And part of that's talking to them very thoughtfully, talking to them honestly and transparently about it. But the resilience is striking. They're just able to move forward, and granted their ages are hell versus had they been teenagers, I think it would be even that much more challenging. So that's probably the most immediate situation that comes to mind. Beyond that, I think it's just some of the overprotectiveness that all parents at times will have because you love your children, you don't want anything to happen to them. Sometimes if it's too much, then they're just kind of set up for life to always be a little bit fragile, and the real world does not care
Yeah.
about a lot of these things. And so, just encouraging them to do sports or get a scratch, if they fall down and get back up, I think just reinforcing to your children that they're going to, get hurt. It's okay. Dust yourself off and don't quit. And they've been pretty robust when it comes to just little things like that.
Yeah. One of the aspects of kind of teaching kids about resilience and helping them see that is, talking to them about how it's okay to make mistakes and demonstrating that. You talked about how you talk to your kids about mistakes. And so I'm just curious if you could add a little bit more to that. When you mess something up, like what do you do with your kids to show that like even dad makes mistakes?
It's pretty simple, but I think often our orientation is to try to model, excellence for our children, and that, we didn't mess up. But for me, it's also modeling accountability. And so when dad does mess up, then whether it's sitting them on the bed or getting on my knees to make sure I'm eye level with them, and just being really straightforward and just go, dad messed up. I didn't mean for XYZ to either say those things or for that to happen. I'm sorry. Do you forgive me? And so just kind of going through a simple dialogue or script around whatever it may have been that daddy screwed up with. And so sometimes having two boys who are roughhousing, more often than not, they might hurt each other. And so then because I modeled it to them so frequently, I'll have them do the same thing, but to each other, and make sure they give each other a hug, and then reconfirm with the other, do you accept his, apology, and then we move on.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I have about the same distance between myself and my younger brother as your two kids are. And there was no shortage of roughhousing in our house growing up. So
I also have a brother, similar to you, 2 years younger. Karate Kid was the movie of the times. And so my mom will tell you stories of, one of us doing the flying kick at the other, knocking him in the chest, knocking him down. And yeah, so try not to let them take it that far, but yeah.
On, don't teach your kids the crane kick until they're older,
right.
maybe.
That's right.
So aside from that very pertinent piece of advice, if you were to bump into younger Colin on the street, pre-dad Colin, knowing what you know now about having, raising a kid to 6 and 3.5, like what's a piece of advice that you give the younger version of yourself about raising family? Maybe something that you found surprising or didn't think about much until the kids came around.
Yeah. So I tell this one to all expecting fathers, which is once they have a child, congratulations, you're in the parenthood club. Nobody really talks to you about how hard it is, at least that first year or two. I think you have an expectation that life's going to change, but you don't really, and some of it is just lived experience. You kind of got to experience it. Even if I tell you it, it's not going to resonate. But those first couple of years, the sleep deprivation, how wildly your life and calendar does change from your social life to just even your relationship with your partner, you're just not fully prepared for it. And if anything, I would just tell myself, as much as you can be prepared, you're not going to be prepared. And just kind of lean in and have lots of conversations with both your partner and people around you, and be ready to ask for help. Look for ways that, your community, friends and family can also help you. So it's an eye-opening experience. It's one of the greatest gifts, but it's not without a complete 180 from whatever direction you're heading in pre-children.
Yeah. So 2 things there. So prepare for a very hard couple of years, because it is hard. It's a big change. And then also you can't quite fully prepare.
That's
So
right. Yeah.
best laid plans, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. I want to talk about frameworks. You are a big believer in the Montessori method, which we have some experience with in our family. But can you talk for listeners who've maybe heard of it? Can you talk to me a little bit about how that showed up in your life and what aspects of it you really liked?
Yeah, it kind of teeters on this idea. The Montessori program, I think some of the really strong qualities about it is it tries to encourage a sense of independence with your children, which I think is really, really important. And it even goes so far as like having kids, wash the windows and not as servitude within the home, but to really just start to have them embody some level of they're responsible and they're accountable to their toys, not to leave a big mess around. And I think doing that stuff early and allowing for them to engage in independent play as opposed to mom and dad or the two parents kind of always being a shadow really can develop, strength at some point before they move out. You want your children to be comfortable at camp. You want your children to be comfortable doing sleepovers. There's a lot of pride in kind of owning your own castle or home or bedroom, and just instilling some of that structure, I think is actually good for children. I think it helps them manage stress. If you have a cluttered room, a tidy place is a tidy mind. It really impacts children too in the same way. There's a lot of science around, especially now with the availability of toys, the cheapness of toys. We can sometimes think, ordering more stuff on Amazon, it will keep them engaged longer. The science actually shows the opposite. Like fewer toys allows for more creativity. It's kind of the creative constraints. And so that's some of the stuff that I think Montessori embodies. The other part of it's a little bit more tactical. Like a lot of Montessori stuff is from like a product tangibleness perspective. It's a lot of wood and real glassware, and as opposed to toys that are kind of feeding the dopamine drip with electronics and lights and stuff like that. And I just think that's a really thoughtful approach to raising children, especially in a world where there's so many lights and flashes around. Everyone's got flat screen TVs, usually multiple TVs, plus mom and dad are on laptops, plus the phones lighting up, plus the Apple Watch. Like there's just a lot of stimuli. And so Montessori is kind of on the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah, and so it's teaching kids. You mentioned independence, so like you can do things on your own, and also like a hefty dose of confidence too. Like I can set out my plate and my cup. I can pour things and you can do that at a very young age, right? Like maybe not without some spills or some messes, but like then I can clean it up, like all of that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, when you think about your children, they're often looking at you and wanting to be like you and model adult behavior sooner than a lot of times I think parents are expecting. And so equipping them with the understanding and adoption of some of this stuff, they start to really get into their own and their own element. And I think it's been really productive, I think, for us.
on that note, too, another thing that you believe really strongly of, and it's sort of come up a little bit in this conversation, is accountability. And that accountability is an important thing for kids to learn about at an early age. And we probably wish plenty of people we worked with had learned this at an early age. So why is accountability so important for you?
Yeah, I'll just kind of back into it at a child level, but I think as adults, the big thing that whether you're a founder or you're an executive, you are kind of the buck stops with you, and you're fully accountable to the team or to your board of directors and investors. And so embodying that maturity can sometimes be the career growth ceiling for some people who are struggling with, call it big business politicking and finger pointing. And the leaders that have coached me and that I've, aspired to and looked up to, they're often the first one to fall on a sword for a team and then distribute and allow their team to get the praises where appropriate. And so at a child development level, I just think it's important. Every action has a consequence. Sometimes it's a good consequence. Sometimes it's a bad consequence. And as someone who loves video games, one of the genius things about games are these positive and negative feedback loops. And so if we only orient ourselves around positive feedback, then sometimes that can also lead to a worse outcome, whether someone's gaming the capital markets or someone's gaming how to get a promotion, as opposed to really understanding and having true consequences around poor decisions, for example. So, with children, try not to be too much of a heavy hand and make it feel like it's severe punishment for making a mistake. Mistakes happen, but also just making sure they understand too that sometimes there's consequences that could impact somebody else, even if they themselves aren't feeling it.
Yeah. So this sort of fits in with the Montessori method, but where does accountability show up with like a 3.5 and a 6-year-old in your family?
Wow, let's think about that one. So I feel a little bit guilty now that I'm a single dad, but also selfishly wanting my kids to play some Mario Kart with me. So we just got the Nintendo Switch 2.
Oh,
Yeah, it's good. It's good. They did a great job. But it's clear to me when the video game is having a negative impact, right? It is a dopamine feeder, and it can behaviorally cause them to get too spun up. And so if they're struggling with listening or they're causing fights amongst each other, then obviously it's a privilege to be able to play the toy. And so, at a very specific level, it can be simple things like that, where I don't want to be an iPad dad where the iPad's the solution for everything. But, then realizing that they have to self-regulate. Dad also needs to play a part in self-regulating the Nintendo. But if it has negative consequences on their behavior or their mannerisms at the table, then, they lose access to it, as one would historically expect. But yeah.
How good is your 3.5-year-old at Mario Kart on the Nintendo Switch?
Shockingly good. And it's even more bizarre to see, the beautiful thing about games is that it's an environment with constraints, and kind of children, just like computer hackers, seem to figure out all the nuances. And my 6-year-old has even gone so far as to want to watch YouTubes of people playing these games. And then he's got like a photographic memory, and he shocked me, showing me hidden areas and levels that he's learned. And yeah, I mean, even at 3.5 and 6, they're doing Mario Kart power turns, and they know when to hit the gas when the countdown's 2. And then, the last comment there is just their ability to, and this also teaches me, when I'm doing things around the house, even if they're not directly tuned in, they're probably on their periphery picking things up. And my oldest and I have played Mario Kart. He's racing. He knows what his power-ups are. He's telling me which of my power-ups to throw on a split screen. He's monitoring it all. I mean, the brain's firing on all cylinders.
Whoa, he's going to be an air traffic controller or something like that as he gets older.
Yeah, so, it's mind-boggling. Yeah.
So on the subject of accountability, by the way, now I need to go get a Nintendo Switch too. This is you've convinced me. On the subject of accountability, you are accountable for the haircuts in your family, for cutting your boy's hair, which one that terrifies me. Mostly my own haircutting abilities, but you described it as a really great bonding experience. So maybe, I don't know if you have a funny story about that, or just what's it like cutting. First of all, how do you cut a 3.5-year-old's hair and get him to sit still? And why is it such a great bonding experience?
I don't know that I have a funny story yet, but the backstory: in college, I didn't have a lot of money. And so for me, having gone to the hair cutter, I had asked them kind of intuitive or out of curiosity, like, do you ever cut your own hair? And so one of them happened to show me, do the mirror and how they did it. And so that's what I did in college. I would just use clippers, and you can buy a set of clippers and the guards all the way up to like 1.5 to 2 inches. And so it's not the best haircut. It's not going to be layered. It's not going to have all the things that a professional haircutter is able to do. But when you're on a budget or you're doing a really simple boys cut, it's pretty easy once you kind of get the hang of it. So I bought some clippers, and then I'll do a big guard. Their hair 2 inches is still pretty long, and then just kind of do a little bit of a fade. What I don't do are things where it's easy to see mistakes. So like a bald fade, I'm not doing that low. Plus, my former wife would kill me if I had done a bald fade. They have beautiful hair. But it's a great experience. I still sometimes take them to the barber shop so that they can also get comfortable, in that environment. But every couple of months, I'll put them on a bar seat. And the kid I bought even has the magic Superman cape, which was the way that we had to get them convinced to wear it. And we'll do a little haircut session.
Okay. So when will the 6-year-old be old enough to cut the 3.5-year-old's hair?
Ooh, good question. I'll have to come back to you on that one. But yeah, maybe a couple of years.
Okay. And then have either of them asked to cut your hair?
So one of the ways in which I got them comfortable with it was kind of showing it on dad's head. Unfortunately, I can't take the clippers off where they could do it without cutting my hair. So they haven't physically done it, but they've seen dad putting it up to his head and they've gotten really good with it. And I asked them questions like, doesn't that feel good? Daddy used to fall asleep, when the barber got the shavers out to do the edge, do the edging, and they really enjoy it now.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe someday they'll be giving you the fade. You never know.
Yeah. Who knows?
You have a great story about your 6-year-old and his fear of surfing. Can you tell me about how he overcame his fear of surfing?
Yeah, so this was recent. This was this past summer. Growing up in Houston, I would get up early. My dad and I would get up early and go surfing for the day. A lot of people joke that there's no waves in Texas, but there are.
I was just wondering about seasonal. That. Where does one go surfing in Houston?
Yeah, along the Gulf.
Okay.
Surprisingly, right before a hurricane, in the wintertime, or something else that kind of got popular is tanker wave surfing. So it's when a tanker comes in, it can push these big swells in that are rideable. And so Texas does have surfing, but for a 6-year-old, every wave's pretty big, and every wave's also pretty rideable because they're so light. And so this past summer, he was worried about sharks or just the surfboard my dad's surfboard's a big longboard, which is the easiest for them to learn on, but it's big. It's a lot to handle. So we sat around the night before with my dad and watched Bruce Brown's Endless Summer, which is just a classic. And that kind of got him excited and interested. And then we drove down the seawall and I was pointing out surfers. And then we got out there with a life vest and he got comfortable kind of floating, and he loves the beach, loves playing in the waves. And then my dad and I got him on the board and pushed him and he body surfed. And the second time, just like he saw in the movies, he stood up and he did arms out, legs out, and he rode the wave all the way into the beach. And we were super proud of him. He was really proud of himself.
Yeah. Wow. Like warrior pose there.
Warrior pose. Yeah. It's great.
Wow. He must have been, to go from being afraid of sharks to then like surfing, impressive. He must have been so proud of himself. That was awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure he still has a fear of sharks, as do I, but he overcame it. He saw so many people in the water and it was shallow, and, just reinforced that granddad and dad are going to get eaten before he does.
You're much bigger, much more of a meal for a shark than a 6-year-old. So
that's right.
Has a 3.5-year-old expressed any interest in getting out on the surfboard yet?
We tried, but he was just not quite there yet. But he did, I think he rode the board with us, like just in a body surf motion, but he also loves the beach, loves doing the sand castles, things like that.
Cool. All right, I want to talk about social media, and not in the way that I think a lot of people would think about, because you have a 6 and a 3.5-year-old, so they're not on social media. We all know there's this growing body of evidence that things like Instagram and TikTok are not the best for kids, right? But I think you also see them as being kind of dangerous for parents too. And so why is that?
Well, number one, Texas just rolled out a policy, so there are no cell phones, electronic devices allowed in school anymore, which
I saw that.
There are things I disagree with happening in the Texas Ledge, but this is one that I think is a really good thing for kids. I think with parenting, and this is true really on any topical basis, but there are a lot of people who are kind of promoting themselves as self-proclaimed experts, or call it influencers. But there's not always a lot of ways in which we can validate especially the way the algorithms just suggest, hey, this is something you might be interested in. And so for me, as someone who I'm a product manager by training, I always want to look at the data and look at the outcomes to help guide decisions. There often seems to be a lack of is this a credible source? Are even the statistics that are being quoted credible, or is it just manufactured for, likes, follows, things like that? And unfortunately, the way the algorithms work, if you find, XYZ, then you're going to get fed more of that. And so whether it's social media or the internet, humans have a tendency to kind of self-select. And it's not so much invalidate my feeling, but validate it is what our tendency is as humans. And so I think that feedback loop, if it's call it a perverse idea that one has, can be not great, because you're getting validation that the way you may be parenting or the way you view the world is the right way. And I don't know how that gets solved today based on the way the algorithms are suggesting things based on what you've already looked at.
Yeah. Maybe just it gets solved by throwing your phone in the other room or something like that. Deleting Instagram and TikTok.
Well, and kind of reflecting on your other question, which is what would I have told myself before having parents? I think animals, humans, we've been having and, creating children since the beginning of the earth, so to speak. And we're kind of naturally born with a gut instinct around our children. And sometimes, hopefully, if you're a good human, that's a strong instinct, and you probably know what's best for your children. You don't always need an expert to necessarily tell you.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. Ignore the Instagram and TikTok advice. You got this, parents. On that note, you mentioned Texas just banned cell phones for kids. Is it all the way through high school? You can't have them in school, I think?
Good question. I think so. My surface level understanding right now is just all public schools, K through high school.
Yeah. Yeah. We're also working on, well, in the state of California, you have to have a policy. It does not say what that policy has to say, but we're working on our ways towards a full-on ban here in our school district. When you think about the relationship that you want your kids to have with technology, now obviously you, like you said, you're a product manager by trade. You work in technology. You invest in technology. You've built technology companies. It's hard to think about it a little bit because your kids are 6 and 3.5, but what do you think about the relationship that you want them to have with technology as they get older?
Also, a really good question that I'm just candidly starting to struggle with. I don't see science and technology by any stretch of the imagination going away. It's going to be a cornerstone to how societies, even survives wherever the earth is going, so to speak, from climate change and just general sustainability. But with the rapid pace of innovation in AI, I'm now starting to worry, where is that entry level opportunity for everybody to learn your trade, learn your craft, because those are the jobs that are already getting wiped out. Like the idea that I need a business analyst is now Claude or ChatGPT. The idea that I need an entry level kind of engineer to write some unit tests or do some bug squashing, that's an AI native IDE now. And so I'm just kind of generally worried about where they can take a career, and especially in, a decade from now when this stuff's so much further along. That's going to give them the right jumping off point to become a master in whatever that thing is that they're interested in. So for me today, it's still introducing them to technology, but also as a parent, not trying to force them, round peg into a square hole. Just because dad was a technologist doesn't mean they need to follow that path. I think that both of them have their own kind of natural intuition, and I'm already seeing strengths and weaknesses in each. I think at the end of the day, it's cliche, but wherever they're really, really passionate about, I think there's so much energy when you find something that you truly love, that especially this day and age, you can make money doing anything. You just have to become kind of the best, or really, really have the expertise that sets you apart. And I think the only way you really get there is continued investment in that area, a lot of mentorship, and just really leaning into that thing that you love that just keeps you up at night. And so as much as I'd like them to, maybe one day have a family business that we're kind of working around, I don't know that it's going to necessarily be modeled, or the expectation from me is that it has to be, a pure play technology company. In fact, I've started to look and explore. It's something private equity has done really well, but like, where can we build some service-based businesses that are family owned and then bring some technology expertise behind the scenes, but are a little bit more kind of anti-AI, so to speak. Like, is AI really going to replace some of these other kind of, call it blue collar type industries?
Yeah, very likely not, unless you can get a fully functional robot that can do plumbing. And I think we're ways away from that. So
Yeah, agreed.
yeah. Okay, speaking of AI, I'm very curious about your use of AI as a parent. So what's the most like creative thing that you've done with AI as a dad?
Yeah, so this sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I've definitely used AI for like helping me understand certain kind of conversational or parenting frameworks around like how to talk to the child about a certain situation, specifically, the divorce, so to speak. But in a more playful sense, funny enough, this is one I saw on social media or Reddit, but it was taking their drawings and then prompting it to create this kind of realistic 3D version of what they had sketched, and blew my mind, blew their mind. Also, you could just see the sparkle in their eye when they saw their character that they had kind of loosely done with crayon really come to life. And I just thought it was, one, incredible at how accurate and specific the AI was able to see what was sketched so loosely and turn it into something. It just was mind boggling. But then it just kind of reinforced their creative engine. They just wanted to keep drawing and do more of it. And so it was kind of a cool experiment for the both of us.
Nice. And so that was kids draw something, what, like a monster or a building or something on a piece of paper with crayons, and then you sort of feed that into ChatGPT and say, hey, turn this into the real life version of the thing.
You can, they're into Nintendo, obviously, but I've certainly watched Cars a million times. So, I mean, you can prompt it stylistically, like make this look like a Pixar movie or make it look like a Nintendo Mario in terms of the rendering and the kind of stylistic characteristics. And it comes out just like that. It's pretty shocking.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. Well, maybe we can link to some of those in the show notes. You told me, and you kind of mentioned this, and I can hear it a little bit when we're talking, is that you have a little bit more maybe fear and skepticism over AI than unbridled optimism. And that's a first for you. So I'm curious about why that is.
I like to fancy myself as kind of someone who is an entrepreneur who's trying to do work in an area that's, going to super serve society. And for the most part of, the last 10 years, it's been financial access and healthcare. And so my worry with AI is not how impressive it is, and or that it can create, call it super contributors, people who are just able to have this co-partner, so to speak, that's almost a reflection of their already great qualities. But it's kind of what we talked about, which is like, where are entry-level folks going to really learn what I've learned through 20 years, to be able to prompt it the right way, to have so much experience to kind of know how to guide the AI to produce the output and the results that, embody some of that experience and learnings along the way. And so, as I mentioned, I'm already seeing numerous companies where, they're freezing success roles, or they're freezing these entry-level roles or business analyst roles, and those just aren't getting hired. And so where over the last couple of decades, whether it's 2008, whether it was the pandemic, we've had groups of people coming out of college where the job market was just not healthy. And I think it's kind of had long-term impacts on some of those folks. And so now this one's even broader for the most part, and it's continuing to kind of chew its way from the bottom up. So that's what keeps me up at night, because it's not just about, the kids in college right now. It's also like, how in 10 years is this going to really reflect things for the kids? My optimistic way of looking at this as someone who has their dual citizenship in Italy and looks forward to retiring in Europe, maybe it means we get time back as a society in a way that America has not embodied very well, to be able to do some of those cultural or craft things, whether it's to open a bakery and really become as good as the French are in pastries and things like that. And so maybe we'll slow down a little bit because we've got all these worker agents doing the things that people are spending 60 hours a week and not spending time with their children. So I'm going back and forth on what this is going to mean for society.
Yeah, every week a different thought on this one. So, yeah, who knows? And like you said, I mean, your kids are still really young. So, a decade from now, they'll be in high school, not even yet college. So, who knows what that's going to look like. But yeah, I think that's really interesting. And yeah, it is. AI is quite a interesting and disruptive, for good, for bad, technology. So time will tell. We shall see. And I wanted to end with a couple of things. One is, somebody might listen to this conversation and think, oh, Colin, he's got it all figured out. He seems really calm and in control. And I think you've said you've had some people tell you that before, and you don't really feel that way. And so I'm curious why that is. And yeah, I'm just curious about that.
Since I was young, in kind of the spirit of my comment on, find something that you just really absolutely love. For me, it really was technology. In the 90s, there weren't a whole lot of people or curriculum to teach you how to program or, the way the web was shaping up. And so a lot of that was just knowledge that I accumulated through self-teaching my way through what is now my career. But part of that was a lot of conviction that I knew that this is what I love doing. And so as a byproduct of that, sometimes people felt like, oh, well, Colin's off to the races. He knows exactly where he's going in life. We kind of started this conversation off. I am a single dad, and I can tell you this has been the hardest thing in my life, and I'm going through a complete reset, both understanding and taking on new parenting roles that sometimes were associated with my partner, to having my whole social network. Now all my friends generally are married with kids. And so I have time now where I don't have the children, but I don't have a lot of friends to hang out with, kind of just introspectively reflecting on the marriage and where I wasn't showing up appropriately as a partner. And then through the sale of my last business in November, just kind of having to reset as an entrepreneur, what do you want to do next? And so for me, while I feel like I have strong opinions about things or I've figured some stuff out historically, the next chapter is very unwritten. Right now it's scratch notes. I'm crumpling things up, throwing them away more often than I'm feeling really good about them. So yeah, I think, life is a journey. Fortunately, I've got great friends. I love my children. I love what I do. So there's like bright spots that help me stay oriented, but I'm still, to get to this, even though you can see the stars and the moon, it's a long process to get there.
Yeah, the journey is the destination, as they say. So you're in that journey again. Okay, well, to end, how can people follow along or be helpful to you on this journey?
Oh, great question. Well, I'm not as active on social media like I used to be, but I welcome any feedback, advice. Send me an email, Colin, COLIN, @flyingacapital.com. Or find me on LinkedIn and drop me a note. And I'd love to hear it if anyone has any advice on single parenting and kind of the next mountain.
Okay. We will direct folks there in our show notes. Let's end with lightning round. Very simple rules. I ask you a question, and you say the first thing that comes to mind. And this is a safe space and a judgment-free zone. So, are you ready, Colin?
Let's go.
Okay. What is the most indispensable parenting product that you've ever purchased?
The toilet bowl thing that makes it smaller for the children to easily sit on and learn how to poop on their own and get rid of diapers.
Ah, amazing. What is the most useless parenting product you've ever purchased?
Oh, God. Probably too many to count. Probably these novel cups that just don't seem to work well to get a child to drink from them. I just have found, borrowing in mind the ones that help, not spill, there's just too many of these like assistive eating and drinking things, and most of them just don't really work well. You just need them to learn how to use a cup.
Yeah, the Montessori method would say, just give them a cup,
Yeah.
just let them spill. What is the weirdest thing you've ever found in your kids' pockets or in the washing machine?
Probably one of Dad's screwdrivers or tools, along with some screws, and wondering what was undone.
Yeah, there's a two-parter there. There's, boy, what is in the pocket here? And then there's also, where did this come from?
Yeah, what chair's about to fall apart?
That's right. True or false, there's only one correct way to load the dishwasher.
Oh, this is a great question. True. You are either a rabid raccoon who just throws everything in the dishwasher with food on it, or you're kind of an architect and you pre-wash. I think of the dishwasher as a sanitation device because once that heater turns on, if there's food on it, it's stuck on it.
Yeah. So you're more of a pre-wash, put it in there very nicely, organized. Every dish has its place. Okay, cool.
That's right.
Same, by the way, same. What is your signature dad superpower?
I like to think I'm still a child at heart, whether it's games, love sitting down with the kids and playing with Legos. So for me, it's kind of continuing to enjoy the things that I had always grown up really liking. And so whether it's playing Mario Kart or letting our imagination run wild with Legos, I enjoy it. I will spend hours in front of the Lego box.
Awesome. What is the crazier block of time in your house? 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.?
To your point about school starting, it's definitely 6 a.m. to 8 a.m.
Morning's a little chaotic, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Breakfast, packing the lunches, getting them dressed, getting them out the door so they're not tardy.
Yeah.
And daycare, you don't have to worry about that. But with public schools, they have to be there.
Yeah.
Between 7:30 and 7:40.
Oof, that's early, man. If your kids had to describe you in one word, what would it be?
Hopefully engaging. Hope that's the word that they would say.
Cool. What is the funniest or perhaps most embarrassing thing one of your kids has ever said in public?
Man, there's a lot that I can't even repeat because they're just not appropriate. Probably one that came up was, questioning gender of someone. I think it was the chef at a restaurant and asking me, Dad, is that a man or a woman? Loud enough for them to hear, but that was an awkward moment.
Okay. We've gotten a few of those like that on this show. So you're not alone. You're not alone. What is your go-to dad wardrobe?
On the weekend, it's probably, some athleisure clothes. I'll not name any brands, but probably the thing I'm doing most often now is I've got a dad purse loaded with snacks, sometimes a charging device, but I'm frequently seen now with my man purse.
Okay, your crossbody bag, as they say. That's a technical term, which also the athleisure brands sell. So there you go.
That's right.
How many parenting books do you have in your house?
We used to have a ton. I no longer feel I need the parenting books yet. I'll probably revisit them when they start to become tweeners, teenagers. Okay. But yeah, there's some really great ones out there. Titles are escaping me now, but happy to send you some links to them.
Would you say that you've ever read any of them cover to cover?
I did. There were, I think, 2 books. Gosh, I wish I could think of the name right now, but I did read them cover to cover. And one of the books that I think is also important, especially in a traditional husband-wife scenario, is just kind of understanding what your wife is going to go through those first couple of years, being the primary kind of nurturer to the children because they're dependent on her for food. So kind of understanding not just the child rearing, but also the supportive role.
Okay. Well, if you do think of them, send them to me. We'll put them in the show notes. But no worries if not. It's okay. All right. We're in the home stretch. How many dad jokes do you tell on average each day?
It's increased. And again, talking out of both sides of my mouth, there's a really funny Instagram just filled with dad jokes. Sometimes they feature babies telling these dad jokes.
Okay.
And they're hilarious. And then I did buy a book just for kids jokes, and my oldest loves it. And we'll sit around. I mean, they're the silliest things, right? Not who's there type jokes.
Yeah.
But we'll sit around and read those out, and he loves them.
Okay. What is the most absurd thing one of your kids has ever asked you to buy for them?
The Nintendo Switch 2.
Okay. And you did.
And I did, because it was their one. They'd gone through this big life transition. And then my oldest started kindergarten last week. He was very demanding about it for months because he got exposed to it. And so I try to not shower them with presents, make it birthday, Christmas, and not spoil them. But this one I felt he was deserving of. And
also, it's fun for you too. So
it's fun for me too.
There you go. What is the most difficult kids TV show that you've had to sit through?
Barring the repetition of Pixar movies like Cars that I think I've watched at least 1 million times. The one as of late is Milo and Chip, which is based on Minecraft, and the voices are nails on a chalkboard, and they love it.
Okay. What is your favorite kids movie?
Seasonally, I really like the new Grinch, the one that was created in 2019.
Yeah.
I thought it was awesome. They also love to watch that all the way through spring. So it didn't feel so seasonal. And then, the Pixar movies, especially ones as of late, like the one about emotions. I thought that was a really
Inside Out.
Inside Out, yeah.
What nostalgic movie can you just not wait to force your boys to watch with you?
This one was a little bit too soon, and so I had to turn it off, but it was Indiana Jones.
Oh, yes. Temple of Doom.
Temple of Doom.
Do you remember that movie is rated G? And there is a scene where a man pulls a still beating heart out of another man's chest. That doesn't seem like a G-rated movie to me.
No, and that's when I had to turn that one off.
Yeah.
But the one that we did watch that I grew up and I still love, and it inspired some of the bamboo activities as a kid, was Swiss Family Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
And they love that one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What is the worst experience you've ever had assembling a kid's toy or a piece of furniture?
I wouldn't say I've had a bad experience. I've got a garage full of power tools.
Okay.
So I might just reframe it as the best experience. And my oldest and I built their bunk beds.
Oh, nice.
And it came flat packed, and it was a project, but it was great. We built it, and then now he sleeps in it.
Cool.
So I think he's really proud of it.
Colin, this is where you and I would be opposites, because that would be the worst experience for me. But I'm glad it worked out for you. 2 more for you. Do you have a favorite back in my day story to tell your kids yet?
Gosh, I'm going to sound like an awful dad, but it's talking about the original Mario in NES. And it was just not, it was 2D, it was very blocky. And so when we got the Switch, you can see on there, you can download the emulators and play the old games. And so because he's heard me talk about it so much, he loves the Super Mario series, and he really wants to play that one.
Still, I would say some of the greatest video games of all time are the 2D Super Mario series. So you don't have to feel bad about that one in the least. Okay, last question. What is your take on minivans?
I am not a minivan dad. I would probably never buy one, although I've had my fair share traveling with the kids of renting one. Mm-hmm. And I understand why they are so great for families. Double sliding doors, all that good stuff.
Yeah, but you draw the line right now at the MERS, at the wearable.
At the MERS.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Colin, that sounds like a great place for us to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining me today. Congratulations to your oldest for starting kindergarten. And I wish you and your fam all the best of luck as you head into this school year and for the rest of this year.
Hey, likewise, Adam. This was really a unique pleasure. Really excited to hear the podcast, and appreciate you inviting me on.
Thank you for listening to today's conversation with Colin Anawaty. You can subscribe and watch the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Just visit www.startupdadpod.com to learn more and browse past episodes. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.